From deep within the forest, a massive grey male bear charged out, and what he did next moved everyone to tears. This isn't folklore or fantasy. It's a true story of love, survival, and an unlikely bond that defied all expectations. It was an early morning in late spring, and the first golden rays of sunlight were filtering through the pine trees of Lamar Valley, one of the wildest and most untouched areas of Yellowstone National Park. The air was cool and still, as if the land itself was gently exhaling after a long, quiet night. Ranger Luke Cora, a seasoned veteran of the park, was out on his usual patrol. He steered his off-road pickup down a narrow dirt trail flanked by endless meadows, where the occasional elk appeared like ghosts in the morning mist. Luke knew Yellowstone like the back of his hand. He could tell you where wolves might have passed through during the night, or where a mother bear might be foraging with her cubs. This morning, everything was just as expected, calm, uneventful. He pulled over near a small rise and poured himself a cup of hot coffee from his thermos. The aroma mingled with the crisp scent of the dewy grass and pine. That moment of peace lasted less than a minute. The crackle of the park ranger radio broke the silence, followed by a tense voice. Unusual movement near Blacktail Ridge. Could be a moose or an injured large animal. Requesting a quick check. Luke set his coffee back in the holder. Sudden calls like this were part of the job. With a mental map of the area always at the ready, he knew Blacktail Ridge was just about a 10-minute drive away. Without hesitation, he shifted gears, spun the truck around, and accelerated toward the coordinates. As the road narrowed, the terrain changed. Open fields gave way to a tangled mix of dense forest and low grassland. Luke kept his eyes locked on the path ahead, scanning clearings and tree lines with practiced precision. If there was an injured animal, the first signs might be circling vultures or faint traces of blood on the ground. Just as Luke had anticipated, his truck rounded a bend and opened onto a clearing of low, dew-covered grass, and he slammed on the brakes. His eyes widened. About 30 yards ahead, lying motionless in the damp field, was a female grizzly bear. Her massive frame was matted with blood, her fur disheveled and soaked crimson around the neck and chest. She wasn't motionless, but she couldn't stand either. Her chest rose and fell with labored, ragged breaths. She was in critical condition. But that wasn't what made Luke freeze. Surrounding her were 3 Wolverines, North America's fierce, feral little warriors. Though only a third of her size, these creatures were infamous for their aggression and relentless will to fight. They crouched low, growling, their razor-sharp eyes locked on the injured bear. Each step they took was calculated and predatory. Luke knew exactly what he was witnessing. Wolverines would never dare challenge a healthy adult grizzly, but this bear was helpless, wounded, vulnerable. To the Wolverines, this was opportunity. Luke reached for his radio, keeping his voice steady but urgent. "This is Ranger Cora at Blacktail Ridge. Confirmed, severely injured female grizzly, surrounded by 3 Wolverines. Requesting immediate backup. Flares and non-lethal deterrents on standby. I repeat, large animal emergency. I'll keep visual distance until support arrives." He didn't move closer. One wrong step, one loud sound, and the Wolverines could launch their attack. And more importantly, he was alone. In that suspended moment, time seemed to slow. The bear let out a faint whimper. Her eyes, wide with fear, met Luke's. Amid the growls and the gentle sweep of prairie wind, a heavy sorrow pressed down on the ranger's chest. She wouldn't last much longer. Luke's gaze dropped to the Wolverine's paws. They were coiled tight, muscles ready to spring. And then roar ripped through the forest. Deep, thunderous, primal, like a storm breaking loose in the heart of the woods. The trees shook violently. Luke turned instinctively, and what he saw made his breath catch. A massive male grizzly exploded out of the tree line. His gray-brown coat bristled, eyes ablaze with fury. He didn't roar again. He didn't need to. He had only one target. Luke had never witnessed anything like it. His instincts screamed at him to back away, but the bear wasn't coming for him. It was coming for them. Without breaking stride, the male charged, his eyes locked onto the crouching wolverines like heat-seeking missiles. The sound of claw meeting flesh shattered the stillness. With a single swipe, he hurled one wolverine through the air like a sandbag. A shriek pierced the valley. Blood now streaked both his front legs, but he didn't flinch. Another wolverine tried to dodge. Too late. The bear pivoted, lashing out with a powerful hind leg that landed squarely against its back. Grass and dirt exploded into the air. Luke stood frozen beside his truck, his hand gripping the still buzzing radio. He knew better than to intervene now. The male wasn't attacking out of rage. He was defending one thing, the dying bear at his feet. A voice crackled over the radio. Response Team 2 en route, ETA 4 minutes, carrying flares and rubber rounds. Avoid lethal force. Luke took a deep breath and switched to the internal comms channel. Male grizzly has engaged, in direct combat with the wolverines. Female still down, unresponsive, holding position, relinquishing preliminary command. Moments later, the distant hum of engines grew louder. Through a haze of dust, 3 forest green rescue vehicles came into view. The doors flew open. Claire, a veteran ranger, leapt out first, flare in hand. Boom! A red flare rocketed into the misty morning sky, bursting with a sharp crack and a shower of sparks. From the opposite side, Ranger Dan, a broad-shouldered powerhouse, marched forward with a long staff tipped with a padded end. He struck the ground hard, creating a pounding rhythm, driving the remaining wolverines back into the grass after their brutal defeat. Now Luke stepped out of his truck, raising one hand to halt any direct action. "Hold your fire. Do not engage the male bear. He's not attacking. He's protecting his mate. Focus on pushing the wolverines out of the area. No rubber rounds unless absolutely necessary." The female bear collapsed with a pained groan. Finally, the immediate threat was gone. But the male didn't leave her side. He stood over her, chest heaving, eyes locked on the last injured wolverine dragging itself through the grass. He didn't chase it. He didn't run. He just stood there like a sentinel, guarding her. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Even the forest held its breath. Luke whispered, more to himself than anyone else. That bear just saved her life. And the way he stays with her, even with humans closing in, it says more than words ever could. This wasn't just survival. This was devotion. And the story was only beginning. The wounded gray female lay still on the edge of the road, her chest rising in shallow, broken breaths. Her fur was matted with sweat, dust, and dried blood, where the wolverines had clawed deep. Bruises bloomed along her ribs, purple beneath her coat, a chilling sign of just how close death had come. Ranger Luke Cora crouched low beside her, every motion slow and measured. Around him, 3 other rangers spread out silently, speaking in low tones, their eyes flicking between the bears and the trees. But it was the male who held everyone's attention. He was larger, his muscular frame rising and falling with each breath. Blood stained his muzzle. Not his own, but that of the wolverines. His black eyes tracked the movements of every ranger, not with hostility, but with something sharper. Something protective. A challenge to anyone who dared come too close. Claire's eyes darted to the injured female bear lying motionless. "We need to help her," she whispered. The bear's chest rose and fell weakly, blood pooling beneath her and soaking the grass. Time was running out, but they had to move carefully. She turned to Luke, voice low, barely a murmur. "We need to act now. She's bleeding out, could already be in shock." The male grizzly hadn't left her side since the attack ended. He paced in tight circles, nudging her with his muzzle, letting out deep, guttural rumbles. Sounds ancient and mournful, stirring something primal in every ranger watching. Then, unexpectedly, the female let out a faint whimper. The male froze, then stepped back. Just 2 steps, no more. But it was enough. Enough to say, "I'll let you try, but I'm watching." Luke's heart skipped a beat. Raising one open hand, he stepped forward slowly and spoke in a soft, calming tone, like one would to a wounded dog. "All right, girl, we're going to help you." The rangers moved as one, slow, deliberate. Towels, gloves, a field stretcher. Claire knelt beside the bear and administered a mild sedative into her hip, just enough to ease the pain and keep her still. The male bear exhaled a wheezing breath, but didn't charge. Luke could feel his gaze, like heat burning into his back, as they worked. When they reached her torso, they found the wounds. Bruised ribs, maybe fractured, punctures from sharp fangs, deep scrapes from skidding across asphalt. But she was still breathing. "She's going to make it," Claire whispered, tightening the last strap on the stretcher. Gently, the team lifted her into the open ranger vehicle. The male let out a long, trembling exhale, half grief, half release. And then, he did something no one expected. He followed. Step by heavy step, he moved to the truck, placed a paw on the edge of the stretcher, and then sat beside her. As they tried to close the rear gate, he stood, planted both forepaws onto the truck bed, like a passenger claiming his seat. "Is he trying to go with her?" one ranger asked. Luke swallowed hard. "I think he is." Once she was secured, he curled his massive frame around her like a wall of fur and muscle. No one spoke. The truck rolled forward in silence, each bump on the rugged trail jarring nerves and hearts alike. And through it all, the male never looked away. He didn't growl, he didn't pace, he simply watched her chest rise and fall. In every way that mattered, it was an act of trust few would ever witness. When they finally reached the gates of the wildlife clinic, their bond had already told its own story. But what happened next would go even further. The Wildlife Rescue Center at the park's edge wasn't built for this. Dr. Hannah Hart, Yellowstone's lead wildlife vet, met the incoming truck, clipboard in hand. Her eyes widened as the male grizzly leapt down from the bed and immediately stood guard as they lowered the female. "He followed her all the way here?" she asked. Luke gave a slow nod. "He did more than that," he said. "He stayed." The emergency room doors swung shut behind the stretcher. Inside, the rhythm of urgency began. Rushing footsteps, monitors powering up, voices clipped with focus. But the male bear didn't follow. He didn't roar. He didn't paw at the door or try to force his way in. He simply lay down, right at the threshold. Head resting on his massive paws, eyes fixed through the narrow observation window. One staff member instinctively moved to intervene, but Dr. Hannah Hart raised a hand. Number, let him stay. Inside the trauma room, the female bear, Ayla, was hooked up to a flurry of machines. Heart rate, respiration, blood pressure. The steady beep of the monitor was faint but present. Hannah gently touched the area near Ayla's throat. Deep puncture wounds dangerously close to her airway. The bleeding had stopped, but the tissue was badly damaged. Internal organs intact, a nurse reported. But she's in hypovolemic shock. We need fluids, fast. They administered IVs, fluids, and stabilizers. The wound was cleaned and sutured. No one in that room treated her like just another animal, because somehow this had become personal. They were fighting for something sacred, a love story written in a language older than words. Outside, night fell. The wind carried the scent of damp pine and the sound of early summer insects. The male bear, Cedar, didn't move. His body remained still, but his eyes never left the door. In the soft glow of the hallway light, they shone like lanterns holding vigil. Claire, hands freshly washed from triage, sat beside Luke. Together, they watched Cedar, this silent, unwavering sentinel. "You see that?" Claire murmured. "If he were human, I'd say he was praying." Luke nodded gently. "I think he's doing more than that. He's standing guard." Midnight. The surgery was over. The worst wounds were stitched. Her blood pressure was holding steady. Ayla remained unconscious, but the beeping of the monitor was stronger, more sure. Hannah stepped out, mask and gloves off, exhaustion in her eyes. And there was Cedar, still lying there. He hadn't moved an inch, hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, hadn't responded to anyone. He was just waiting. Then something happened. From inside, Ayla stirred. She didn't open her eyes, but her paw twitched against the blanket. The monitor ticked up slightly. Cedar lifted his head. No growl, no cry. But his ears twitched and his eyes widened. And then he chuffed, a soft, low sound, like the earth exhaling. A vet assistant inside the room whispered. She heard him. By dawn, her vitals had stabilized further. She was breathing steadily now, and quietly, affectionately, the rescue staff began calling them by names, names that came naturally, as if they'd always belonged to them. Ayla, Cedar. No one needed to explain it. These weren't just bears. They were something ancient, something bonded beyond biology. At 6:15 a.m., Ayla moved again. A soft groan, a slow twitch of her paw. Her weary eyes fluttered open, blinking, disoriented. Immediately, Cedar stood. Not aggressive, not frantic, just alert, fully present, as if every cell in his body was built to protect her. Ayla lifted her head, weak, trembling, and met his gaze. He gave a soft grunt. She blinked. Slowly, a silent nod. Then she lowered her head again, nestling into the blanket like someone who had finally found home. Hannah, adjusting her IV, whispered, "She knows he's still here, and for her, that's enough." Over the next 2 days, Ayla improved, little by little. Her body temperature stabilized. Her wounds began to heal. She took in some broth, then mashed berries. Her breathing matched the rhythm of the forest itself. And Cedar never left, sometimes curled at her feet like a living blanket, sometimes sitting near the wall, always watching her through the tangle of wires and tubes. He never touched the equipment, never growled, never panicked, except once. On the second evening, Ayla whimpered in her sleep. Cedar stood, padded silently over, and pressed his forehead gently against hers. A silent message. It's over. You're not alone anymore. The bruises on her ribs had turned from black to deep violet. She could now shift her weight, lift her head for longer stretches, drink on her own. Cedar remained at her side, patient, alert, tender in a way that defied every expectation of a wild animal. But he began to change. He barely ate, refused to leave the room, not even to explore the outdoor pen built just for him. When the team tried to coax him out, he growled, not in anger, but fear. Fear that if he turned his back, even for a moment, she might not be there when he returned. "We're reaching a breaking point," said one wildlife behaviorist at the morning briefing. "He's under immense emotional strain. If he doesn't rest, if he doesn't eat, he may collapse before she recovers." The team was torn. They wanted to honor this remarkable bond, but they also had to protect Cedar's health. He wasn't a pet. He was still wild, and for all the beauty in what he was doing, there were no protocols for what to do when a wild bear is mourning in real time. It had been a week since Ayla was rescued from the jaws of the Wolverines. The wounds on her neck and chest were slowly closing. She had started eating again, first just a few spoonfuls of thin broth, then mashed berries. She could stand now, at first wobbly, but each hour made her stronger, and Cedar was still there. He hadn't left her side. His body curled at the foot of her recovery pad, close enough to feel her breath, far enough not to disturb the fragile web of wires and tubes. His eyes remained watchful. To Cedar, Ayla wasn't just a mate. She was everything, but as her strength returned, so did a question no one on the rescue team wanted to face. What happens next? Cedar and Ayla were wild animals. They couldn't stay in the clinic forever. That morning, a meeting was called in a small room behind the ICU wing. Dr. Hannah Hart sat with Luke and the senior staff. The mood was heavy. No one wanted to speak first. At last, Hannah broke the silence. "Ayla is strong enough for release into the rewilding zone," she said gently. "We've successfully reintroduced several grizzlies there before." She pointed to the monitor displaying Ayla resting peacefully under a shaft of morning sun. "The forest there is designed for minimal human contact. Full-time monitoring, natural terrain, and prey opportunities. If we move her now, she'll still remember how to be a bear." Luke folded his arms, nodding slowly. Then he asked the question hanging in the air. "What about Cedar?" The room fell completely silent. No one answered, because no one knew. Hannah exhaled. She had been grappling with the same question for nights. "We've never seen a bond like this before," she admitted. "But nature has its own rules, and no matter how human their emotions seem, we have to ask, keeping them together, are we doing it for their sake or for our own?" Someone on the team suggested they release them both at the same time, but Hannah shook her head. "There's no way to know what will happen. If Ayla needs space to readapt, will Cedar give it to her?" So the team chose a cautious path. "We'll take it step by step," Hannah said. "We release Ayla into the rewilding forest. We observe. Then we see how Cedar responds." No one objected. But no one felt at peace either. A week after her final treatment, Ayla was strong enough to leave the rescue center. Dr. Hannah Hart and the park rangers had spent days preparing a special area, a monitored rewilding zone. Half wild, but fully natural, trees, streams, and a near-complete absence of human presence. That morning, the air was crisp and clear. Luke and the team lifted Ayla onto the stretcher in silence and carried her toward the waiting transport. She didn't resist. Her eyes were clear, tracking the swaying pine branches above as the breeze moved through them. And Cedar followed, not barging ahead, not protesting, just walking behind her, step for step. A silent companion, needing no command. When they reached the rewilding zone, Ayla was gently lowered onto a bed of soft, dry leaves beneath a pine tree. Cedar sniffed the air, circling the perimeter of the fenced enclosure, as if checking every possible way in or out. Then the gate closed. Per rescue protocol, Cedar wasn't allowed inside immediately. The team needed to observe Ayla without his influence, to ensure she could begin adapting on her own. But Cedar refused to leave. He lay down right outside the fence, chin resting on the earth, eyes fixed on the forest where Ayla had disappeared. For 2 straight days, he didn't eat, barely moved. Surveillance footage captured him now and then, standing up, pressing a broad shoulder against the mesh barrier, emitting the faintest, rumbling growl, like calling out but not daring to demand. Watching from the monitor, Hannah whispered, "He's waiting until she's ready." On the 3rd morning, when staff arrived for checks, Cedar was gone. His large paw prints still marked the soft earth, but he had vanished. No noise, no warning, only a few gently swaying branches. Like a quiet goodbye. But Cedar hadn't gone far. Infrared cameras and trackers showed he was lingering near the forest edge. Always at a respectful distance, never interfering with Ayla's recovery, yet never truly gone. That night, Ayla stood on her own, picked berries from the ground, and rested under a tree, never once glancing toward the fence. The team took that as the sign. It was time. They opened the final gate into the national park. No cage, no handlers, just the wild, open forest. That afternoon, Ayla limped into the wilderness, still healing but alive. Cedar wasn't in sight, but his traces were. Twin paths carved through pine needles, scratch marks on trunks, tufts of thick brown fur caught on low branches. Autumn had arrived in hushed tones, leaves blanketed trails, the air crisp and fragrant. 3 weeks passed since Ayla stepped into the open forest. Cedar hadn't been seen since, but his presence lingered, tracks, scars on bark, and separate ranger sightings of both bears, always close, but never together. Her collar beeped faintly, tracing her into the hills near the river basin. Cedar's signal was weaker, but unmistakable. Always near, never overlapping, as if they were circling on the edge of reunion. Rachel Myers, a senior wildlife biologist, was the first to witness the moment everything shifted. She was walking into a quiet clearing, binoculars trained on a small deer family, when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy paws behind her. She froze, bear spray in hand, but when she turned, she saw Cedar, silent, standing on a rise, watching her, but not interested in her. His ears twitched toward the trees behind her. Rachel turned, and there was Ayla, stepping into view, her coat gleaming in soft light. At first, neither bear moved. Then Ayla snorted, gentle, low. Cedar snorted in return, and slowly, step by step, they came together. Rachel didn't move. She didn't even breathe. She watched as Cedar gently pressed his head to Ayla's shoulder, not as a mate claiming territory, but as a guardian, returning home. Rachel whispered into her radio. They found each other. Deep in the forest, the rangers left them, Cedar and Ayla, in a clearing untouched by human presence. Wild, primal, quiet. No snares, no trails carved through the earth. Just the woods, as they had always been. Luke lingered for one last look before turning away. He whispered, "Take care of her, because once she took care of you." Cedar didn't turn back. He and Ayla stepped into the trees, side by side, not as survivors, not as symbols, but something simpler, something truer as a family. Weeks passed. Hikers reported sightings near the lake, always together, always close. 2 figures moving through the wilderness, not as lone spirits, but as one story. If you believe that nature still holds room for miracles like Cedar and Ayla, share this story. Let the world feel its quiet power. Subscribe to the channel to follow more incredible journeys of survival, healing, and the deep, mysterious bond between humans and the wild.